We got one more guest here for this Thursday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is professional handicapper Tony George from Doc Sports. Tony, how's it going today, man?
Good, real good. Ready to get it done here today in college basketball and NBA, and of course, looking ahead to some Super Bowl props, starting in on those here the next couple of days. Haven't gathered all the information on that yet, but be picking up some different sheets around town for that here this week, or you can get them on your apps, I guess, out here. Let me rephrase it. I'm still in the old school mode, but having a nice surge in the NBA here and trying to play a little catch-up in college basketball. Been some surprising results, but nonetheless, things are going above average here.
All right, so let's talk Super Bowl 53 a little bit. 2.5, total 56.5 in that type of range. What do you think about what we've seen here so far, Tony, from the opening line of some places Rams -1 to what we've got now with New England -2.5?
Well, you've got, usually it's early money, sharp money, but public really has hit this a little bit, and this is, the Super Bowl is rare, unlike, Major League Baseball World Series or even the NBA Finals. This line is kind of driven by the public more than any other singled out game of the year. So, at the end of the day, I guess it's going to end up being pros versus Joes. The public's going to be on New England and the pros are going to be on the Rams if you keep giving them more and more, points here. 2.5 now, probably see 3. Really, it's really what it boils down to me is in the simplest of terms, without even overthinking it. Are you going to bet the better team in the Rams, or are you going to bet Brady and Belichick? I mean, that's the bottom line. And, I'm torn on that. I faded Brady and Belichick against Kansas City, and you can bitch and moan about the calls, and, the Rams shouldn't be there because of this, and, Kansas City should be there because of that. At the end of the day, both those teams put themselves in positions where they ended up losing because they put themselves in bad positions late in the games and were outplayed, at one point in time or another, And so, at the end of the day, when you have a team like New England that has a game plan that can hold Kansas City to 32 yards at Arrowhead in the first half, Kansas City probably didn't deserve to win. So, at the end of the day, New England's a good team, but it's still you're betting Brady and Belichick versus the better team. And how do you want to approach that? Forget looking at the handicapping matrices and, because the line's sharp, obviously it's the only game in town. If one thing about the Super Bowl, Adam, if this game was on a regular Sunday, I would consider it having not a lot of line value and one you just want to watch, a really good football game between two really good teams. And the other thing is, are you going to let Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, arguably, you get beat up by a 24 or 25-year-old kid, and is Belichick going to get out-coached by a 30-something, 30-year-old coach? And, so you have to ask yourself those questions, and that's kind of at least the way I'm looking at it now. But I do think the Rams are the better team here, and I think the total's about right on the number.
Now, there are probably a lot of people that are, betting the Super Bowl for maybe the 3rd, 4th, or 5th season, something like that. Obviously, you've been in this business a very long time. I think 2 weeks before the Super Bowl is actually a detriment from a betting and handicapping standpoint because we beat every damn angle to death about this game. So how do you sort of manage that where you've got basically 2 weeks of thinking about this game?
Well, one thing that I do that's probably a lot different than 99% of what your listeners do, I don't watch ESPN and NFL Network and, all these pregame shows, John Shine, I'll watch some handicapping videos on YouTube from handicappers that I respect that have different takes, that look at things the way that I look at things, but the way the general public looks at things, pardon me, in terms of a major network and all these shows that are just, like you said, leaving no stone unturned. When this guy eats grapefruit on Thursday and then follows it up with cottage cheese, he runs for 2.7 yards more per possession. You can just go through the list of things I tend to ignore them and look at what's real, you know. And a lot of times, you know, the problem with handicapping, and it happens to me, it happens to Brad Powers, one of your other guests here on the show, you know, especially looking at college basketball when there's 70 or 80 games, you can't see the forest because of all the trees. And you never want to get yourself in that position, especially if you're in a bad streak. You strip it down and take a look at it for what it is in the simplest of terms. You know, and, you know, it's simple. I've done this 27. This is my 27th Super Bowl. I think I've won 19 of them, you know, on the side play over the years. So I've lost some. But, you know, at the end of the day, I tend more to concentrate on the prop bets more than the side and total, you know, and prop betting, you know, is really where you can win some money. And, you know, you used to be able to win a lot of money prop betting because of the difference between Westgate and the Mirage. And, you know, we're talking like 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. You could do a lot of middles. Over and under rushing yards for the running back for one team in the Super Bowl may be 68.7 at one book and 79.5 at another book, or something, you know, something like that. And you were able to go in and middle both sides. Now with the information age, they're all pretty close. But still, I tend to do something where I think I have what I call a positive expectation bet. You know, something that I can sink my teeth into that's not what color a tie Jim Nance is going to wear or how many times they're going to mention Giselle or, you know, always bet the coin flip. Just, you know, I do a lot of, you know, like most guys, do a lot of $20 bets on some props, you know, that player props, over and under passing yards, interceptions, you know, how many field goals, you know, break it down by quarter. You know, now you could do halftime wagering, which is nice, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, there's a lot of different options to explore. But there, I have a set value of like 7 or 8 or 9 prop bets that I always look into. You know, the running back yards, receiving yards, interceptions, you know, some things to do with turnovers. I always throw a $50 bet on a safety just because the number is like 30 to 1 or something. You know, just maybe you get lucky. I hit one here a couple 3 years ago. But, you know, there's a few that you throw out there and say, well, I'm going to take a chance because it's 30, 40 to 1. But, you know, at the end of the day on the side and the total is the least amount of money that I have wagered when it comes to the Super Bowl, Adam. I have more wagered on other things that I think have some validity.
Well, we'll talk more about some of the specific prop bets that you've made or that you really do like on next Thursday's segment. But let's transition over to the NBA because I want to touch on this point with you here. Victor Oladipo goes down last night. It was not pretty. The Pacers rallied to win that game over Toronto. Didn't cover the number, but you know, still, I mean, to get that win, I think was impressive enough for them after watching their best player go down. When a superstar goes down, Tony, how do you deal with it in the short term for that team?
Well, you look to fade them when you can, just like you have with the Lakers with James being out. They've won some games, but, you know, at the end of the day, when players go out, you know, you got to look to fade them in spots. You know, you got Davis out for New Orleans. There's a huge injury, much like the Oladipo. One thing in the favor of Indiana, I guess, more than anything else is the way they play defense. They can really play defense when they dial it in, you know, and so that keeps them in games. You know, but losing your leading scorer, you know, and the superstar on your team is definitely a spot you want to start to look to fade those teams, you know, short term. I usually wait a game, so the Pacers next game, you know, and I don't have it up in front of me right now. But, you know, I want to wait and see how they react, you know, the next game before I do anything against them. How are they going to fare? And I was going to look and see here, you know, since we're on the discussion, I'll just go ahead and take a look at that real quick.
They play Memphis on Saturday night.
Okay, and Memphis is beat up. You know, they got guys out. You know, Conley's out. Gasol. I mean, so there's a team that's, you know, look how they got beat up last night. You know, with their stars out. But is that on the road or at home?
That one's on the road for Indiana. And then they come right back and they actually play Golden State at home, which is going to be very interesting for them.
There's your fade spot. There's your fade spot right there. See what they do against Memphis. If they look like dog shit, you know, they look discombobulated on offense. Chemistry's not there. You know, it's a little different with one player versus like the Lakers with like three players out. You've got Ball, James, Rondo's been out, so they're used to that. But let's just say, like tonight, the Lakers got three players that are main contributors to their team out. So the number one thing I look at is what players are filling in and what players are out of position, meaning they usually don't play two guard. They usually don't play small forward role. They usually don't play in be expected to be the main rebounder. So you have players playing out of position, and how does that chemistry work against a team that's fully healthy? So you're going to have to watch Indiana against Memphis, and Memphis that's going to be a low-scoring game, I'll tell you that. That total will be under 200 for Memphis and Indiana in that game. Guarantee you. And I'd be surprised if anybody scored 100 points in that one. But, you know, at the end, so you might want to look at the totals, too, and how it affects them. You know, look at the totals adjustments, because you got a player that's shooting 20-some points a game. That makes a lot of things happen for you, you know, that now he's out of the mix. But, you know, watch him for a game and then turn around, assess what they did, take a look at the box score, and see who's on deck. Thing about Golden State is you might want to look at halftime lines on games like that, because bottom line is Golden State's going to be laying double digits in there no matter how it shakes out, you know, in that game when they travel to Indiana. You know, Golden State, teams like that are clearly much better, get complacent in the second half and tend to let off the throttle a little bit. But first half, usually they come in, they dial it in, they put up a decent number, and then they coast their way through the game, which is why a lot of guys miss a lot of covers in the NBA, laying big points with good teams. You know, get that first half line to get that number down into single digits, and if it's reasonable, bet it. I've been doing that this year, Adam, and in the NBA year to date, I've only had one loss on a first half line in the NBA this entire season. I put out, 10 or 12 of them. So, you know, that might be a game there. You want to look at the first half line when they play Golden State. So there's different ways to manipulate it and take a look at it. But watch them for a game, then turn around and you know, reassess, see what they did.
You know, something that's kind of interesting about the Pacers here, and you mentioned the loss of production from Oladipo, which is certainly significant, but teams are also going to change their tempos based on, you know, the fact that Oladipo's not there. Oladipo missed some time earlier this year, and in fact, the Pacers have only played 34 more minutes with Oladipo on the floor than off the floor, and their pace has actually been much quicker when he hasn't been on the floor. So that's kind of interesting. You would think a team would want to slow it down, you know, because without your best player, the other team probably has an advantage on more possessions, but they actually got faster. So I'll be curious to see if that continues for the Pacers here, if they speed up the game a little bit without their best player. That'll be an interesting trend to watch.
Yeah, well, you know, lineup, you know, they change their lineup and their offensive tempo a little bit. Sometimes they want to run a little bit more. They maybe a team like Indiana that's ranked 21st in the league, you know, on offense now. And, of course, you talk about that Memphis game. Memphis is dead last. They're 30th. Indiana's 21st. Indiana's now, you know, that's a false rating because their biggest point production player is out. So they're going to, you know, on a five, I'll guarantee you, if you broke down top five offenses, or you broke down the top offenses on a 5-game stretch, you know, say the next 5 games, you know, I'll guarantee you that Indiana is going to be less than ranked 21st, you know, in the NBA, which is not a good, you know, like I said, Indiana's success comes with their defense. There's no doubt about it. It's not that they're not going to, you know, that the entire team, you know, is going to fall apart because one player is out. But Indiana is the number 1 ranked defense in the NBA. So my biggest concern, with Indiana, is not so much how are they going to score, you know. And you're saying, well, they're going to change pace, they're going to change offensive tempo, they're going to go small versus long. You know, with, you know, bringing in, you know, rotating a bunch of guards in there and picking up the pace. I understand that philosophy. That's probably what you have to do. But my biggest concern and my biggest watchdog item is going to be, you're the number one ranked defense in the NBA. How are you going to maintain that number one defense with him out? And if they can still maintain a top 5 defensive efficiency rating, they're probably going to be able to cover some numbers, because they're going to be getting some good numbers now, because odds makers are going to put a bigger number on teams they're playing than they would have otherwise.
All right, let's go to the college hardwood here, because we got the Big 12 SEC Challenge this weekend. Iowa State, Ole Miss, Alabama, Baylor, Florida, TCU, South Carolina, Oklahoma State, Texas, Georgia, Kansas State versus Texas A&M, West Virginia, Tennessee, Vandy, Oklahoma, Kansas, Kentucky, the marquee game, Arkansas, Texas Tech. Tony, what do you think about these non-conference games right in the middle of the conference play season? Well,
it provides a challenge. It really does. When you start playing out of conference in, late January. I stated this, I believe, on your show last week. There's 3 seasons. There's the non-conference schedule, then there's the regular season schedule, and then there's the postseason schedule. There's 3 seasons within the season. You handicap each one a different way. Now we're in the middle of conference action. Teams are finding their groove. You're used to knowing, how Kansas State always plays Kansas, or how Iowa State's tough to beat at home, and they're getting a number against a highly ranked team. They're almost an automatic take. Just a couple of the you're going to be wanting to take home teams in the Mo Valley, even though they have a losing record, and if they cover numbers or they beat teams straight up that are better than them. All the things that you are used to, now you throw it out the window. Now you basically have to go off power ratings. You really do. So you ask yourself, well, in my opinion, I think the Big 12 conference is only behind the Big 10 conference in terms of overall conferences. I really do. I think the Southeastern Conference is behind the ACC. If you take a look at Ken Palm and a couple other of these team rankings and Sports Insights and all these other sites, you Bang the Book's got a ton of information. I know you do a ton of work over there. I go to Bang the Book daily and look at some of the stuff that's over there. I want to gather more than one opinion, but at the end of the day, the Big 12 conference is going to be better. You're going to be wanting to look at home teams big time. If you can find home teams in this, it's going to be who. And I didn't look ahead because I'm more worried about today. Where is that Kansas-Kentucky game at?
It's in Lexington.
Oh, that's a problem for Kansas. One thing about just that game specifically, and I'm sure Kentucky's going to probably be, I haven't looked at the power ratings on those two, to match those up just yet. Like I said, I'm a little bit more worried about, I'll just give you a power rating. I've got my power ratings pulled up here. I'll go ahead and take a look at that. I have Kentucky as a 1 point. I got Kentucky at 93 and Kansas at 92.5. But the one thing about Kentucky, I guess more than anything else, is it's the same Calipari rule that's been in effect. We're not going to look that great in the non-conference schedule. I've got all these studs in here, a bunch of freshmen, same story, different year, and I'm going to mess with the rotation. I'm going to work in a lot of different players, a lot of different roster changes, and I'm going to figure out what works the best in terms of my team gelling together, playing together the best way, giving us the best chance to win with this player rotation set. This starting 5 roster. This is the first guy we bring off the bench if this happens. This is the first guy we bring off the bench if that happens. Then they get into about mid-season form, and they start to gel. And that's exactly what Kentucky is doing again this year. Now they're starting to gel. Now they're starting to make a case to be the best team in the SEC along with Tennessee, who had a tough game last night and didn't cover a big number their first time being ranked number 1, all that stuff. Conversely, Kansas has done nothing to impress me this year. They let games get away from them. when they're dominating. West Virginia on the road last weekend was a prime example. You know, the other night they had trouble I had Iowa State against them, plus 5.5. They barely got out of that game alive. Kansas hasn't got it all together this year yet, in my opinion, and they have trouble putting teams away and closing out games strong. You know, and it's not because they're bored. It's because they're having turnovers. They're still making bad decisions, where I think Kentucky's on the uprise. They're starting to gel and get it together. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Kentucky win that game, Adam, just based on current form.
Tony George, professional handicapper over at Doc Sports. What's going on over there right now, Tony?
Well, tell you what, we had a rough weekend last weekend in college basketball, Adam, and we kind of turned it around this week. Missed out on a winning card last night. Unfortunately, I took St. Louis, who shot 10% from three-point range and got beat by a team they out-rebounded by almost 15 rebounds. But at the end of the day, it's a bounce-back mode. My biggest game of the week this week, it's a small valley. It's a small conference game out of the Ohio Valley, which I really like. And then we've got a little late steamer there. And, of course, they have cards guaranteed at DocSports.com. Tons of great information. NBA has been on a really nice roll. I'm still working on my NBA card tonight. I'm torn between a couple of games, and so I'm still working on that. But, you know, at the end of the day, we have plays up there at Docs every day by 10:30 in the morning Central, and they're 100% guaranteed. Just get over to DocSports.com and check out our action.
Well, of course, Tony does a lot of great YouTube stuff as well. So go to YouTube, look for Tony George. You'll find some good free pick videos there. Tony George, DocSports.com. Appreciate the time as always, bud. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Adam.